At our family dinner, my mother-in-law yelled, "Gold digger," and threw her drink in my face. Everyone laughed until I calmly got up and called the manager. When he said, "Welcome back, boss," and handed me the keys, her jaw dropped. "My name is Danielle Freeman. I'm 38 years old, and I'm a restaurant owner in the New Orleans French Quarter." The night my mother-in-law threw a glass of Pinot Grigio in my face, we were sitting beneath a crystal chandelier in the private dining room of Maison Celeste, one of the oldest restaurants on Chartres Street. There were 11 people at the table. My husband, Joshua Ellis, was beside me. His mother, Samantha Ellis, was across from me. His sister Rachel Green and her husband Kevin were there, along with cousins, an aunt, and 2 family friends who had known Joshua since childhood. Samantha had spent most of dinner telling everyone that Joshua had carried me financially for years. Then she slid a cream-colored document folder across the table. On top was a typed agreement claiming I owed Joshua $142,600. "Sign it," she said. "Then maybe we can stop pretending you married my son for anything except money." I pushed the folder back. Samantha's smile vanished. "Gold digger." Then she threw her drink. Wine ran down my cheek, soaked the collar of my black dress, and dripped onto the white tablecloth. Someone laughed. Then Rachel laughed. Then Kevin. Joshua didn't laugh, exactly. He looked down at his plate and smiled. That hurt worse. I stayed calm, because tucked inside Samantha's folder was a transaction number dated March 17, 2023. And she had no idea what that number proved. I stood, wiped my face with my napkin, walked to the service station, picked up the house phone and said, "Could you ask Cameron to come in here, please?" The laughter faded when the manager entered. Cameron Stevens looked at my wet dress, then at the table. His expression changed. He reached into his jacket. "Welcome back, boss." Then he handed me the brass front door keys. Samantha's mouth actually fell open, and that was only the first thing she learned that night. Welcome back to my channel. If you've ever had somebody mistake your silence for weakness, you'll probably understand why I didn't yell back. And if you enjoy stories where the truth takes its time but eventually arrives with receipts, subscribe and stay with me, because to understand why those keys mattered, I have to go back 3 years. Back when I still believed my restaurant had failed because of me. I met Joshua when I was 31. At the time, I was running a small neighborhood restaurant called Juniper House, about 15 minutes outside the French Quarter. It wasn't glamorous. We had mismatched wooden chairs, a kitchen that was too small, and an air conditioning unit that made a noise like a lawnmower every July. But it was mine. I had started with 12 tables, 4 employees, and $28,000 I'd saved from years of restaurant work. By the time I met Joshua, we had 32 seats, weekend reservations, and a shrimp and grits dish that had somehow developed a small local following. Joshua worked in commercial insurance. He was charming without seeming slick. That distinction mattered to me then. On our 3rd date, he asked how much money restaurants actually made. I laughed. "Do you want the romantic answer, or the answer where I show you my grease trap invoice?" "The grease trap invoice." I liked that. He seemed interested in the ugly parts. The broken freezer, the employee who called out 20 minutes before dinner service. The supplier who raised oyster prices without warning. The nights I came home smelling like garlic and fryer oil. When we married 2 years later, Samantha acted thrilled. For about 6 months. Then she started asking questions. Not about me. About numbers. "How much did the wedding cost you? Is Juniper House profitable? Do you own the building? How much debt does the restaurant have?" Joshua always laughed it off. "Mom likes to know everybody's business," Samantha would correct him. "I like to know whether people are responsible." The first time she called me financially irresponsible was at Thanksgiving. I had brought dessert. She had asked me how many hours a week I worked. "About 60, I said. She looked surprised. "For a little restaurant?" Joshua said. "Mom?" "What? I'm curious." Then she smiled at me. "You know, Danielle, there are easier ways to earn a living," I said. "Probably. There are also easier ways to spend somebody else's money." The room got quiet. Joshua's aunt suddenly became fascinated by the cranberry sauce. I waited for Joshua to say something. He touched my knee under the table. That was it. Later, in the car, I asked him why he hadn't defended me. She doesn't mean anything by it. She said I spend your money. You know you don't. That wasn't my question. He sighed. My mother can be difficult. If you react every time she pokes you, she wins. I remember staring through the windshield at the rain. That sentence became the operating principle of my marriage. Don't react. Don't make things worse. Don't give Samantha what she wants. What I didn't understand was that silence works only when the other person has some shame. Samantha did not. In January 2023, Juniper House was doing well enough that I decided to renovate the back dining room. Nothing extravagant. New flooring, better lighting, a second refrigerator, a proper storage area so boxes of dry goods would stop living beside my office desk. The project was budgeted at $64,000. I had $93,000 in the business reserve account. Joshua knew that because I showed him everything. I believed transparency was part of marriage. That sentence embarrasses me now. Around the same time, Samantha began having what Joshua called money pressure. Her late husband had left her a beautiful house near Audubon Park. But beautiful houses can still have mortgages. She'd refinanced twice. She spent freely. Country club membership, trips, designer furniture, a kitchen renovation she insisted was necessary for resale. One Sunday afternoon she came to Juniper House while I was doing inventory. She stood in my office doorway holding her handbag. You're really expanding? Renovating. Joshua says you're spending $60,000, 64. Her eyebrows rose. And he's comfortable with that? It's business money. Marriage means there's no such thing as business money. I looked up. Samantha, are you asking me something? She smiled. No, just trying to understand how you think. That should have bothered me more than it did. 3 weeks later, I ended up in the hospital. Not for anything dramatic. My appendix decided it had completed its life's work. I woke after surgery with an IV in my arm, a plastic bracelet around my wrist, and Joshua sitting in the chair beside my bed answering emails. The doctor told me I needed at least 10 days away from work. I negotiated him down to 7. He did not negotiate. Joshua said he'd help with the books while I recovered. Our assistant manager could handle service, but payroll and vendor payments still needed approval. I gave Joshua temporary access to the operating account, not the reserve account. At least, that was what I thought. Samantha came to the hospital the second afternoon. She brought flowers and criticized the vase. Then she sat beside me and said, Maybe this is the universe telling you to slow down. I think it's my appendix telling me it hated me. She didn't laugh. I mean it. Joshua worries about you. He worries about everybody. He shouldn't have to. Something in her voice made me look at her. But she was adjusting the blanket over my feet. She looked maternal, concerned, almost kind. 4 days after I came home, Joshua told me one of our produce payments had bounced. I sat upright on the couch. That's impossible. It's probably a timing issue. There's 30 grand in operating. I stared at him. What does that mean? He showed me the banking app. The balance was just under $7,000. I felt cold. There were several large payments I didn't recognize. Joshua said they were connected to renovation deposits. I was foggy from medication. I asked him to print everything. He kissed my forehead. I'll handle it. I wish I could go back and hear those 3 words the way I hear them now. I'll handle it. For the next month, everything went wrong. A seafood invoice went unpaid. Then a linen invoice. The contractor stopped work because a deposit supposedly hadn't cleared. Our landlord emailed me saying February rent was late. I paid it manually. Then March rent somehow didn't draft either. I called the bank 3 times. They told me payment instructions had been changed through an authorized account profile. I assumed Joshua had changed something accidentally while helping. He apologized. He looked exhausted. He told me he felt terrible. And because I loved him, I spent more energy comforting him than questioning him. That was my first major mistake. My second was accepting Samantha's help. She had worked as a bookkeeper years earlier. Joshua suggested she review my accounts. I said no. He pushed. You're trying to recover, Danielle. Mom can organize the mess. I don't want your mother in my business accounts. She's family. So am I. That's not what I meant. But a few days later, Samantha arrived at our house with a laptop bag. Joshua had already downloaded the statements for her. I was furious. He told me I was overreacting. Samantha sat at our dining table, clicking through spreadsheets. After about 40 minutes, she took off her glasses. This business has been bleeding money. No, it hasn't. She turned the laptop toward me. There were expenses everywhere. Transfers, charges, returned payments, late fees. She had highlighted them in yellow. I'm sorry, she said, in that soft voice people use at funerals, but numbers don't care about feelings. I stared at the screen. It didn't make sense. I knew my margins, I knew my payroll. I knew exactly how much crawfish we bought during festival weekends. Restaurants can hide money problems for a little while. They cannot hide them from the person who orders 12 cases of tomatoes every Tuesday. Yet there it was, a disaster with my name on it. Joshua stood behind me. We'll figure it out. Samantha looked at him. You can't keep rescuing her. I turned around. Rescuing me from what? Neither answered. That was the beginning. Within 2 months, the renovation stopped. Within 4, I was behind with the landlord. By September, I gave up the lease. I can still remember the last night. I walked through the empty dining room after the chairs were stacked. There was a small brass key on a blue ribbon that I had carried for 7 years, the front door key. I locked the restaurant for the final time at 11:42 p.m. Then I sat in my car and cried until almost 1 in the morning. Joshua held me when I got home. He told me businesses fail. He told me I was more than a restaurant. He told me he would take care of us. I believed him. For about 2 weeks. Then Samantha began telling people Joshua had paid my debts. It started quietly. Rachel called and said, Mom mentioned Josh had to cover a lot. Cover what? Your restaurant. He didn't. There was a pause. Okay, that okay told me everything. At Christmas, Samantha announced in front of 12 people that Joshua had sacrificed nearly $200,000 keeping Danielle out of bankruptcy. I nearly dropped my fork. That's not true. Joshua stared at his plate. Samantha said, You don't have to be embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed, I'm confused. Same thing, sometimes. I looked at Joshua. How much did you tell her? He rubbed his jaw. Can we not do this here? That was the moment I first understood that Samantha's version of events had not come from imagination. Joshua had fed it. On the drive home, we had the biggest argument of our marriage. He said he had used personal funds to cover some of my business obligations. I asked how much. He said around $90,000. I asked for records. He said he didn't have everything organized. I asked why he never told me. He said I was already falling apart. Then he said something I never forgot. You needed to believe you could still stand on your own. I said, Joshua, if you put $90,000 into my business, there will be a record. Of course there's a record. Then show me. He didn't. Instead, 3 days later, he deposited a folder on our kitchen counter. Inside were photocopies of transactions. Several showed transfers from an Ellis family account. The total came to $87,400. I looked at them for hours. Something bothered me, but at that point I had closed my restaurant, lost 6 employees I cared about, and spent months blaming myself. I was tired. Humiliation makes you tired in a very specific way. You stop defending yourself because every defense sounds like begging. Samantha knew that. She became bolder. If we went out to dinner, she joked that Joshua should hide the check from me. If somebody complimented my shoes, she'd say, Joshua has excellent taste. If I brought food to a family event, she'd ask whether her son had paid for the ingredients. Once Rachel laughed and said, Mom, stop. Samantha answered, If Danielle can spend it, Danielle can joke about it. Joshua rarely defended me. He preferred private apologies. I know she's awful. She's trying to get a reaction. Don't let her win. Always the same thing. Stay quiet. So I did. But I stopped being passive. There is a difference. 3 months after Juniper House closed, I took a temporary operations job at Maison Celeste, in the French Quarter. I had known the owner, an older man named Henry, through the restaurant community for years. Maison Celeste was beautiful but tired. The dining rooms had tall windows, faded green walls, and old framed photographs of New Orleans musicians covering the staircase. The kitchen was excellent. The business systems were not. Henry still kept reservations in a leather book. He paid 2 vendors by handwritten check. His idea of inventory software was asking the chef whether we were running out of anything. I loved it immediately. I reorganized scheduling, renegotiated supplier contracts, cut waste, built private event packages, changed nothing about the food people loved. Within 6 months, private dining revenue had increased enough that Henry joked I was going to put him out of retirement by making him work. Then one Tuesday morning he called me upstairs. He placed a cup of coffee in front of me. "I'm selling." My stomach dropped. "To who?" "Depends. On what?" "Whether you're interested." I laughed. He didn't. I told him I couldn't afford Maison Celeste. Henry said, "You might be surprised what I care about." He didn't need the highest offer. He wanted someone who would keep the staff, keep the name, keep the old photographs, keep the gumbo recipe exactly where it was. We worked on the arrangement for months. I put in everything I still had personally. Henry financed part of the sale. A local bank financed another portion. I brought in a small, silent investor who had eaten at Juniper House for years and knew how I operated. I did not become secretly wealthy. I became deeply responsible for a very expensive old building with plumbing older than my marriage. There's a difference. The final purchase price was $1.18 million. My initial equity was $164,000. Most of that came from selling a small piece of property my grandmother had left me, and from money I had rebuilt through consulting and operations work. Joshua knew I was working on an ownership arrangement. I never told him the exact terms. Not because I was hiding money from my husband, because by then he had stopped showing me his records. Every time I asked about the $87,400 he claimed to have spent rescuing Juniper House, he found a reason to postpone. I started noticing other things too. Samantha somehow knew details I had only discussed with Joshua: what my lender wanted, how much I was estimating for repairs, which week's Maison Celeste had cash flow pressure. She began making little comments. "You're not trying to own another restaurant, are you? Some people touch a hot stove twice. Joshua cannot finance another fantasy." I told her, "Joshua isn't financing anything." She would smile. "Of course." That smile bothered me more, every time. So I stopped talking about Maison Celeste at home. I signed the ownership papers through Freeman Table Holdings LLC on April 8, 2025. Cameron Stevens, who had been managing the restaurant for 12 years, became my general manager. The morning we closed, Henry handed me 2 old brass keys. One was polished from decades of use. The other was almost black. "Don't lose these," he said. "I'll put them somewhere safe." "No, use them." He closed my fingers around the keys. "A restaurant isn't a trophy, Danielle. It's a door. Keep opening it." I put one key on my ring. The other stayed in the office safe. For the first time since Juniper House closed, I felt like myself again. Not healed, but recognizable. Then something strange happened. A letter arrived from the bank that had handled Juniper House's old business account. It was a routine archival notice. They were updating their online records and giving former commercial customers a final period to request detailed access logs before older data moved into long-term storage. Normally, I would have thrown it away. Instead, I stared at it. Authorized account profile. That phrase came back to me. The bank employee had used it when my rent payment stopped. I requested everything. 2 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived. I took it to Maison Celeste and opened it upstairs after closing. For 40 minutes, nothing made sense. Then it did. There were 3 authorized digital users on my old business account. Me, Joshua, and someone identified as L. Ellis. I had never authorized an L. Ellis. Samantha's legal first name wasn't Samantha. Samantha was what everyone called her. Her first name was Lauren. Lauren Samantha Ellis. I felt my hands go cold. The authorization had been added on January 19, 2023. I had been in the hospital January 18th through January 21st. The request had been made from Joshua's authenticated profile. I kept reading. Transfers followed. $12,000, $18,500, $9,200, $21,000, $14,600. Some went to an account ending in 8814. Others went through a payment service. Total, $75,300. Then I saw something even stranger. 3 days before my February rent was due, the automatic payment instruction had been disabled from L. Ellis's profile. The same thing happened before March rent. The login addresses matched the network associated with Samantha's house. I sat alone upstairs, listening to the muffled sound of a bartender stacking glasses downstairs. I wanted to call Joshua immediately. I didn't. For years, my problem had been that I reacted with information before I had understanding. So I put the documents back in the envelope. Then I called an accountant named Abigail Griffin, who specialized in restaurant financial reviews. I told her I needed her to look at an old business failure. She asked whether I suspected theft. I said, I don't know what I suspect anymore. Abigail found the first major contradiction in less than a week. The photocopies Joshua had shown me after Juniper House closed were real transactions, but they had been described dishonestly. His $87,400 rescue had not gone into my restaurant. Most of it went into our joint household account. Then it moved elsewhere. Some paid our mortgage, some paid his credit card, and $52,000 went to Samantha. Meanwhile, money had been moving out of Juniper House, not into it. I remember sitting across from Abigail in my office. She tapped one line with her pen. You were not being supported. I swallowed. No, you were subsidizing somebody. That sentence changed something inside me. For years, Samantha had called me a gold digger. Meanwhile, money had been dug out of my business and carried directly into her life. I still didn't know why, or whether Joshua had understood the full extent of it. I wanted to believe he had been manipulated. That hope lasted 3 more weeks. One evening I asked him again for the records. We were in the kitchen. He was opening a bottle of beer. Why are you back on this? Because your mother keeps telling people I owe you money. She exaggerates. She uses exact numbers. He stopped opening the bottle. What are you saying? I'm asking where the $87,400 came from. I told you. No, you gave me photocopies. His face changed, only slightly. But after 9 years together, I knew the muscles around his mouth. You don't trust me, I said. Show me, and I won't have to. He put the bottle on the counter. I cannot believe we're doing this again. Then he walked away. That was answer enough. I began preparing quietly. I moved my personal documents to the office safe. I changed passwords. I made copies of tax returns. I photographed the financial folder Joshua had given me. I did not touch our joint money, except to pay ordinary bills. And I told Cameron that nobody in the Ellis family was to receive information about Maison Celeste's ownership or finances. He looked at me for a moment. Family trouble? Yes. Need security? Not yet. Cameron nodded. Restaurant people understand the phrase, not yet. It means, keep your eyes open. The family dinner happened 6 weeks later. Samantha announced it in the family group chat. She had chosen Maison Celeste, of all places. Saturday, 7:30, she wrote. Private room. My treat. We need a proper family conversation. I read that message 3 times. Joshua was sitting across the room. Did you know about this? About what? Dinner. He looked at his phone. Mom mentioned it. At Maison Celeste? She likes the place. I almost laughed. Samantha had spent the previous year calling restaurants Danielle's little hobby. Now she wanted to humiliate me inside mine. There was something almost elegant about it. I asked Joshua what the proper family conversation was. He said he didn't know. He was lying. I knew, because he scratched his thumb against the edge of his phone case whenever he lied about something important. Saturday came. I arrived separately. That alone irritated Samantha. She was already seated at the head of the table when I entered. You're late. I checked the clock. It was 7:27. I'll try to control myself. Cameron saw me from the hallway. I gave him a tiny shake of my head. He understood. Treat me like any other guest. That part matters. I could have embarrassed Samantha the second I arrived. I could have announced ownership before appetizers. I could have had staff fuss over me. I didn't. I wanted to know why we were there. Dinner began normally enough. Oysters, soup, fish, wine. Then Samantha started. She mentioned a cousin's daughter, who had just married a dentist. A woman should bring something into a marriage, she said. Rachel sighed. Mom. What? Samantha looked at me. I'm complimenting marriage. I said nothing. 10 minutes later, she asked Joshua whether he was still considering protective paperwork. My fork stopped. Joshua said, "Not now." Samantha ignored him. "We're family." Then she told everyone I was working at Maison Celeste because Juniper House had failed. Technically, that was a beautiful sentence. Almost every word was true. The conclusion was not. Kevin asked, "Are you managing here now?" Before I could answer, Samantha said, "Helping." I took a sip of water. "Something like that." She smiled. That was when she got confident. She talked about the supposed $142,600. That number was new. For years it had been 90,000. Then 87, then nearly 200. Now it was exactly $142,600. I asked, "Where did that number come from?" Samantha reached beside her chair. She had brought the cream folder. She slid it across the table. Documented expenses. Joshua stared at it. He knew what was inside. That hurt. I opened the folder. The first page was titled Acknowledgement of Marital Debt and Separate Property Waiver. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because Samantha had finally overreached. The agreement said that in exchange for Joshua forgiving part of the debt I owed him, I would waive any interest in property he received from his family and acknowledge that future business assets acquired with marital support could be subject to reimbursement. In plain English, they wanted me to sign a piece of paper saying Joshua had financed my life, including anything I owned now. Samantha had even brought a notary, one of the family friends at the table. That was the official trigger. Until then, I had evidence of suspicious transfers. Now I had a document using those transfers to claim rights over my current business. And attached to the agreement was a transaction schedule. Page 4, March 17, 2023. Transaction reference 73-48119, $14,600. I recognized it. It was one of the transfers from Juniper House. But Samantha's document labeled it Funds advanced by J. Ellis for D. Freeman business obligations. The bank record showed the opposite. It was money leaving my business account. And now I knew they were willing to put the lie in writing. I closed the folder. "No." Samantha blinked. "No what? I'm not signing this." Joshua leaned closer. "Danielle, we can discuss it privately." "You brought a notary to dinner," Samantha said, "because you always avoid accountability." "No. I avoid signing things that aren't true." Her face tightened. Then came the speech. She said Joshua had sacrificed his 20s and 30s for me. He met me at 31, but accuracy had never been Samantha's favorite garnish. She said he had saved my business, supported my dreams, paid my debts, protected me from embarrassment. Then she looked around the table. "This woman has taken and taken from my son." Nobody spoke. I looked at Joshua. "Do you agree?" He swallowed. "Some of it." That was it. Not Samantha. Joshua. That was the moment my marriage ended. The paperwork came later. The lawyers came later, but emotionally, it ended with those 3 words. "Some of it." I asked, "Do you believe I owe you $142,600? He looked at his mother, then at me. "It's complicated." I nodded. "No, it isn't." Samantha slapped the table. "Stop performing." Several people jumped. "You think because you can cook and smile at customers that everyone is too stupid to see what you are?" I didn't answer. She pointed at me. "You lost your business. My son paid your bills. Now you're working in somebody else's restaurant while still acting like you're some independent woman," Rachel murmured. "Mom, enough." Samantha raised her voice. "Gold digger." Then came the wine. Cold across my cheek. A few shocked sounds. Then Kevin laughed nervously. Rachel laughed too. Not because it was actually funny. Because some families laugh when they're uncomfortable and call it peacekeeping. 2 cousins joined them. Joshua looked down and smiled. That was when I stood. I wiped my face, walked to the house phone, called Cameron. He came in less than a minute later. He looked at me, then at Samantha's empty glass. "Everything okay?" "Not exactly." I held out my hand. "Do you still have the front keys?" The locksmith returned them this morning. His expression shifted. He reached into his jacket. Welcome back, boss. Then he put the brass keys in my palm. Silence. Real silence. The kind that changes the pressure in a room. Samantha stared at him. Then me. Rachel's mouth opened. Kevin looked at Joshua. Joshua had gone pale. Samantha said, "What did he call you?" I took my napkin and dabbed wine from my jaw. "Boss." Cameron looked at me. "Want me to have the room cleared?" I said. "Not yet." Then I sat down. Samantha laughed once. It sounded fake. "This is ridiculous." Cameron remained beside me. She looked at him. "You're the manager." "Yes, ma'am. And she works for you." "No, ma'am." He glanced at me. "I work for her." Samantha's face changed. Not dramatically. That would make a better movie. In real life, people don't always gasp. Sometimes their eyes simply lose focus because their brain is trying to reject what their ears just heard. Joshua whispered, "Danielle." I ignored him. Rachel asked, "You own Maison Celeste?" "Yes." "Since when?" "April," Kevin said. "This April?" "Yes." Samantha looked at Joshua. "You told me she was consulting." He looked at me. "You said you were working on something." "I was." "You bought this place?" "Yes." "With what money?" There it was. Not congratulations, not surprise. Not even anger first. Ownership. He wanted to know what money. I said, "Mine." Samantha recovered enough to sneer. "Don't be absurd. This building alone must be—" "Careful," I said. It was the first time all evening my voice changed. Not louder, colder. She stopped. I placed the cream folder on the table. "You just accused me of living off Joshua." "You have. Then why are you asking which money I used?" She looked at the keys in my hand. "You're hiding assets from your husband," Joshua said. "Mom." "No. If they're married, he has rights." I looked at Joshua. That was the second useful thing Samantha said that night, because his reaction told me she knew about the ownership waiver. He knew what they were trying to capture before they knew what I owned. Cameron asked quietly, "Danielle?" I said, "Could you bring my office envelope?" He nodded and left. Joshua leaned toward me. "What envelope?" "The one I wasn't going to need tonight." Samantha scoffed. "Oh, now we get theater?" I looked at her. "You brought a notary." Nobody laughed. Cameron returned with a brown envelope. I removed one sheet. Not everything, just the bank access page. I slid it to Joshua. "Who is L. Ellis?" His face emptied. Samantha stopped breathing for half a second. "That was all I needed," Joshua said. "I don't know." I nodded. "Okay." Samantha reached for the paper. I put my hand over it. "No," her voice sharpened. "What is that?" "Something my bank sent me." "What bank?" "The bank that held Juniper House's accounts." Joshua pushed his chair back slightly. "Danielle, this isn't the place." I almost admired the consistency. For years, every place was the wrong place for truth. Thanksgiving wasn't the place. Christmas wasn't the place. The car wasn't the place. Our kitchen wasn't the place. Apparently the private dining room of my own restaurant wasn't the place either. I said, "You're right." Then I put the paper away. Samantha smiled in relief. I continued, "This isn't the place. Abigail's office Monday morning is." Joshua stared at me. "Who's Abigail?" "The accountant reviewing where my money went." That was when Samantha stood. Not when she learned I owned the restaurant. Not when Cameron called me boss. When she heard the word accountant. She stood so quickly her chair scraped backward. "This dinner is over," I said. "For you." "Yes." She looked at Cameron. "We haven't paid," I said. "You said it was your treat." Her cheeks reddened. "I'm not paying after being treated like this." I couldn't help myself. I gave her a small smile. "Then I guess you really did come here to eat on somebody else's money." Rachel covered her mouth. Cameron looked down. Even he almost lost it. Samantha stormed out. Joshua followed her to the hallway. Then he came back. "Danielle, come home with me." "No, we need to talk." "We've needed to talk for 3 years." "You ambushed me." I looked at the wine stains on my dress. "You might want to reconsider that word." He stared at me. "Are you leaving me?" Yes. His expression collapsed. I wish I could tell you I felt powerful. I didn't. I felt sick. There is nothing triumphant about realizing the person beside you has been choosing your humiliation because it makes his life easier. The ownership reveal was satisfying. The marriage ending was not. I stayed at Maison Celeste until 2 that morning. Cameron made coffee, then another coffee. At some point he said, "For what it's worth." Nobody on staff laughed. I looked at him. That's a strange comfort. Restaurant industry. We take what we can get. I laughed for the first time that night. Then I cried. Monday morning, Abigail and I met with a banking investigator and my attorney. The cream folder changed everything. Until the dinner, we had unexplained historical transfers. Now we had Joshua and Samantha using one of those exact transactions as evidence that I owed them money. That made motive much easier to establish. The bank confirmed that the L. Ellis profile had been created through Joshua's account credentials while I was hospitalized. It had authority to initiate transfers. That profile had moved $75,300 out of Juniper House over 9 weeks. Abigail traced $61,000 of it to Samantha. The rest had gone through 2 accounts Joshua controlled. The bank could not tell us why. The records could tell us where. My attorney sent preservation notices. Joshua called 17 times that day. I didn't answer. On Tuesday, Samantha texted me. "You are destroying this family over bookkeeping mistakes." I saved it. Then, Joshua was trying to help you. Then, you had no idea how bad your business was. Then, if you pursue this, everybody will know what kind of wife you are. I saved those too. For the first time in years, her threats felt small. Not harmless. Small. Because once somebody's words are sitting beside actual records, the words lose weight. Joshua eventually hired his own lawyer. 3 weeks later, we entered formal divorce proceedings. He moved into Samantha's house. That fact would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. The family divided itself. Rachel called me. I almost ignored her. Then I answered. She cried. She apologized for laughing. I told her, "I'm not ready to make you feel better about that." She went quiet. That's fair. It was the first useful thing anyone in that family said to me. Then she told me something. 2 years earlier, Samantha had bragged that she had saved her house from foreclosure, without begging the bank. Rachel never knew where the money came from. She remembered the timing because it was the same month Juniper House's renovation stopped, March 2023. My stomach tightened. Did Joshua know? I don't know. Rachel. She started crying again. I think so. That supporting detail led us to the part I still wasn't prepared for. During document exchange, my attorney obtained emails between Joshua and Samantha. Most were boring. Family schedules, bills, insurance questions. Then there was an email dated January 16, 2023. 2 days before my surgery. Samantha had written, "If Danielle keeps expanding, she's going to tie up every dollar you two have. You need to get control before she signs more contracts." Joshua replied, "The reserve is business money. She'll notice, Samantha. Not if the business needs rescuing anyway." That sentence made me put the papers down. There was more. January 20th, while I was still in the hospital. Joshua wrote, "Access is set. Do not touch payroll." Samantha replied, "I'm not stupid." February 2. I moved 12. Call me. February 27th. Stop the automatic rent. She needs to feel the pressure, or she'll keep putting money back in. Joshua replied, 1 month only, Samantha. Whatever it takes to make her stop. There it was, the late truth. Juniper House had not simply failed while Samantha took advantage. She had engineered the pressure that helped kill it. She canceled the rent drafts. She moved reserve money. She allowed vendors to bounce. And Joshua had let her. At first, according to his later explanation, he believed they would replace the money after Samantha refinanced her house. Then Samantha's refinancing fell through. Instead of telling me, they kept moving things around. Then they discovered something convenient. I blamed myself. And once I blamed myself, Joshua didn't have to confess. Samantha saw an opportunity. If Juniper House failed, she could say I was irresponsible. If I became financially dependent on Joshua, she could control the story of our marriage. And Joshua? Joshua liked being the rescuer, even if he had to help create the emergency first. That was the part that stayed with me. He later insisted he never wanted Juniper House to close. I believe him. That probably sounds strange, but cruelty doesn't always require somebody to want the worst possible outcome. Sometimes it only requires them to want their own comfort more than they care about your pain. Joshua wanted to keep his mother's house. He wanted to avoid fighting with her. He wanted me to slow down. He wanted to feel necessary. He wanted all those things. And when the cost became my restaurant, he let me pay it. Samantha's lawyer tried to call the emails, family discussions taken out of context. My attorney asked what context made "stop the automatic rent" look better. There wasn't one. By July, Samantha was panicking. The bank wanted answers. My civil claims sought the diverted funds, damages tied to the interference with Juniper House, and legal costs. The divorce was moving forward, and Maison Celeste was legally protected because I had funded my acquisition from traceable separate and post-separation sources, with formal financing, rather than from Joshua's money. The document Samantha tried to force me to sign at dinner would have muddied that. That was why she wanted the signature. She didn't know I owned Maison Celeste, but she knew I was building something. She wanted a claim on it before she knew what it was worth. That greed ruined her. The final meeting happened in September. Not in court, in a conference room at the bank's attorney's office. I was there. Joshua was there. Samantha was there. Our lawyers, the bank investigator. Abigail. No chandeliers, no wine, just fluorescent lights, paper cups, and a table that looked like it had hosted 1,000 unpleasant conversations. Samantha wore navy blue. She looked respectable. That was always her favorite costume. The bank investigator started with the access record. Small doubt first. Had Samantha used the L. Ellis login? She said she couldn't remember. Had Joshua created it? He said he may have created temporary access for bookkeeping purposes. Had I authorized Samantha to initiate transfers? No. Joshua said he thought I had verbally agreed. I said, "Where?" He didn't answer. Then the transaction schedule came out. $75,300 moved from Juniper House. Samantha said those funds were used for my benefit. Abigail quietly placed her tracing summary on the table. $61,000 had gone toward Samantha's mortgage arrears, property taxes, and personal credit line. Samantha's lawyer whispered to her. She shook her head. That money was repayment. For what? My attorney asked. Family support. What support? Joshua had been supporting Danielle for years. There it was again. The lie. She could not stop telling it, even now, especially now. My attorney placed the cream dinner agreement on the table. Samantha stared at it. You described transaction 73-48119 as money Joshua advanced to Danielle's business, Samantha said. That was my understanding. The investigator slid over the original bank record. The $14,600 had gone from Juniper House to an account benefiting Samantha. Nobody spoke. Then came the emails. Not all at once. One at a time. Access is set. Do not touch payroll. I move 12. Stop the automatic rent. She needs to feel the pressure. Samantha stopped looking at me. Joshua looked physically ill. Then my attorney read the final line. Whatever it takes to make her stop. That was the moment Samantha finally lost control. She was going to ruin him. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm. She pulled away. She was obsessed with that restaurant. Every dollar, every weekend, every holiday. Joshua was disappearing inside her life. I stared at her. So you took my money. I protected my son. You canceled my rent. You had money. In the account you were emptying, you would have spent it. The room went silent. Samantha realized what she had said. Too late. The bank investigator folded his hands. Mrs. Ellis, just so we are clear, are you saying you redirected the funds because you believed Miss Freeman would otherwise use them for her business? Her lawyer said. Do not answer. Samantha's face turned red. Joshua whispered. Mom, stop. She spun toward him. You told me she agreed. He stared at her. And there it was. The last break. The villains turned on each other. Joshua said. I told you to replace it. You gave me access. You said you'd refinance. You knew exactly what we were doing. My attorney didn't interrupt. Nobody needed to. For 3 years, they had protected themselves by maintaining one shared lie. Once that lie cracked, each needed the other to be more guilty. That is a very efficient way to destroy an alliance. The settlement negotiations became serious after that. Samantha did not go to prison. People sometimes expect a dramatic story to end with handcuffs. Life is usually more administrative, more expensive, and slower. She agreed to repay the diverted money, plus a substantial portion of my damages and legal costs. To do it, she had to sell the house she had been so desperate to save, the house my restaurant had unknowingly helped keep. That consequence felt almost too precise. She had helped take my restaurant to protect her house. In the end, the restaurant records were what cost her the house. Joshua surrendered his claim that I owed him for Juniper House. The divorce settlement specifically acknowledged that he had no ownership interest in Maison Celeste. He also had to reimburse part of the money that moved through accounts he controlled. His relationship with Rachel fractured when she learned he had let their mother use family gatherings to humiliate me while knowing the truth. Kevin sent me one message. "I'm sorry," I laughed. I didn't respond. Some apologies are for the person sending them. You are not required to provide delivery confirmation. Joshua asked to see me alone before the divorce was final. I agreed once. We met in a coffee shop in Metairie. He looked older. So did I, probably. He said he never expected Juniper House to close. I know, he looked surprised. You do? Yes. I thought you believed we planned the whole thing. Your mother planned pressure. You helped. Then it got worse than you expected. He nodded slowly. That's what happened. I looked at him. And when it got worse, you let me believe I caused it. His eyes filled. I was scared. So was I. I didn't know how to tell you. You had 3 years. He wiped his eyes. My mom kept saying once you recovered, it wouldn't matter. I almost smiled. Recovered from what? He didn't answer. That was the whole story. They wounded me, then waited for me to recover, so they could decide the wound no longer mattered. Joshua said he loved me. I believe that too. Love is not proof of character. Sometimes it is just proof of attachment, I told him. You liked me best when I was strong enough to carry everything but weak enough to need you. He looked down. I left before he could answer. Our divorce became final in November. I lost things. I want to be clear about that. Winning did not put Juniper House back on the corner. It did not return 3 years of my life. It did not make the staff I laid off forget the fear in their faces. It did not give me my marriage back in some repaired form. And it did not erase the fact that I had doubted my own competence, because 2 people I trusted had manufactured evidence against me. I spent nearly $43,000 on legal and accounting costs before reimbursements. I lost friends who decided the situation was too complicated. I stopped speaking to most of Joshua's family. For months, I woke up at 4 in the morning convinced I had forgotten to pay something. Trauma can be very boring. Nobody makes movies about checking the same bank balance 6 times before breakfast. But that was part of the cost. Then, ordinary life returned. Slowly, 6 months after the divorce, Maison Celeste was busy on a Thursday night. Not a holiday, not a special event. Just Thursday, the kitchen was calling orders. Somebody at table 12 wanted to know whether the sauce had dairy. A server had accidentally entered 2 desserts instead of 1. Cameron was arguing with a vendor about an invoice. Normal problems, beautiful, ordinary problems. I walked upstairs to my office. The brass key was on my desk. The same one Cameron had handed me the night Samantha threw wine in my face. After the dinner, I had cleaned it with a towel and put it back on the blue ribbon from Juniper House. For months, I kept it in a drawer. One morning I realized that was exactly what Henry had told me not to do. A restaurant isn't a trophy, it's a door. Keep opening it. So now I use the key. Every morning. Some days I'm the first one in. I unlock the old front door while Chartres Street is still quiet, and the sidewalks are damp from cleaning. I turn on the entry lights. I walk past the photographs. I hear the kitchen refrigerator humming. Then I start the coffee. Nobody calls me a gold digger there. Nobody jokes about who paid for my shoes. Nobody asks whether I'm allowed to spend my own money. My staff mostly asks whether payroll is done and why the upstairs printer hates them. I prefer that. Samantha moved to a smaller condo outside the neighborhood she had lived in for years. I heard through Rachel that she tells people she downsized because the house was too much maintenance. Maybe she even believes that now. Joshua moved to Texas for work. He emailed me once on what would have been our anniversary. I didn't answer. Not because I hate him. I don't. Hate is a kind of unpaid job, and I already work enough hours. Rachel and I eventually spoke again, carefully. She came into Maison Celeste one afternoon and asked for a table in the main dining room. She didn't ask for anything free. When the bill came, she paid it. Then she left a 25% tip. I noticed. Restaurant owners notice everything. Before leaving, she stopped near the door. I know paying for lunch doesn't fix anything. No, I just wanted to come in without taking. That almost made me cry. I said, "Thank you. We're not close. Maybe someday we will be, maybe not." Freedom also means letting relationships become whatever the truth can support, instead of forcing them back into their old shapes. A few weeks ago, Cameron found the cream folder while we were reorganizing my office. The one Samantha slid across the table. The agreement saying I owed Joshua $142,600. He held it up. "Why do you still have this?" I looked at it. For a second, I saw that night again. The wine, the laughter. Joshua's eyes dropping to his plate, Samantha's finger pointed at my face. Gold digger. Then I saw something else. Page 4, transaction 73-48119. The number that exposed them. The number Samantha included because she was so certain nobody would ever check. The thing she used to shame me became the thing that proved what she had done. I told Cameron. I forgot to throw it away. He handed it to me. I carried it downstairs. Not dramatically. No fire. No speech. Restaurants have shredders for old financial paperwork. I fed the pages through one by one. Cameron watched. "You okay?" "Yeah. Want me to make coffee?" "You always think coffee is a treatment." "I've been in hospitality 20 years. It's our only treatment." He smiled and went back to work. I shredded the last page. Then I put the brass key in my pocket and walked to the front door. For years, Samantha used money to decide who deserved respect. She thought needing help made a person weak. She thought owning things made a person important. She thought if she could convince everyone I was dependent, then she could define me. But the lesson I carried out of all of this wasn't that I won because I owned $1 million restaurant. The restaurant mattered. The records mattered. The money mattered. But they weren't the deepest victory. The deepest victory was that the next time someone tried to tell me what I knew about my own life wasn't true, I checked. I kept the document. I asked the question again. I stopped accepting later as an answer. And I stopped confusing silence with peace. Sometimes silence is peace. Sometimes silence is simply the room where somebody else's lie grows comfortable. So now, when something matters, I speak. Calmly. Clearly. With records when necessary. And when somebody throws a drink in my face, I don't throw one back. I call the manager. Sometimes he hands me the keys. That's my story. A glass of Pinot Grigio, a false $142,600 debt, one March 17th transaction, and an old brass key turned a family humiliation into the truth they never expected me to uncover. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs the reminder that quiet people can still keep receipts. Tell me in the comments what moment would have made you walk away, and subscribe for more stories.